Welcome to today's explainer. We usually think of probation as a second chance, right? Like it's the lucky alternative to sitting in a prison cell. But today, we're unpacking some hard data, some really fascinating recent legal rulings, and firsthand accounts to uncover what is honestly a pretty uncomfortable truth. We have to ask ourselves, has probation fundamentally transformed from an off-ramp into a trap? Okay, let's dive into this with a real story. In March of 2024, a man named Wesley Vaughn was living in an incredibly grueling reality. He was homeless in Corvallis, Oregon. He was burning through what little cash he had on sleazy motels, basically living out of a duffel bag and wearing these wax suede boots just to protect his feet from the constant freezing rain. And through all of this brutal day-to-day survival mode, he was tethered to an ankle monitor. He was on probation, stuck 70 miles away from his partner, and literally over 1,000 miles from his family.
But here's the thing, Wesley's story, it's not an anomaly. We have to zoom out for a second and look at this staggering number, 2.9 million. That's how many people are currently on probation in the United States today. It's this massive, almost invisible system that actually impacts way more people than are sitting in state and federal prisons combined. This is a systemic reality playing out in our neighborhoods every single day, and it's costing enormous tax dollars and impacting millions of lives.
Section 1. The Probation Trap. So, on paper, probation is structured as an alternative to incarceration. It is supposed to be the path forward, but the actual data tells a much darker, way more complicated story about what happens once you're actually trapped in this system. As of 2022, less than half of the people who exit probation actually completed successfully, just 46%. The majority, 54%, are failing the system. They're having their probation revoked or exiting under unsuccessful terms. If an alternative that's literally designed for rehabilitation is failing the majority of the time, we have to ask how.
Well, the answer lies heavily in this alarming little statistic. 1 in 10 admissions to state prisons every single year are for what the system calls technical violations of probation. Now, I want to be absolutely clear about what a technical violation is. It means no new crime was committed. No new laws were broken whatsoever. A technical violation simply means a condition of probation was broken. Someone missed a Tuesday meeting, failed a drug test, or maybe crossed a county line, and they were sent straight to prison for it.
Section 2. Set up to fail.
Now, what's really interesting about these rules is that when you look closely at standard probation conditions, you immediately spot this crazy web of impossible catch-22s. For instance, you are mandated to secure full-time employment. Makes sense, right? But wait, you also have to allow unannounced visits from your probation officer directly to your workplace. I mean, that is a shockingly effective way to damage your reputation with an employer or outright get fired. Meanwhile, you're on the hook to pay monthly supervision fees of up to $917 a year, plus $20 drug tests sometimes 3 times a week. How are you supposed to pay that heavy financial burden if the rules limit your ability to hold a steady job? You're also told not to associate with anyone who has a criminal record, which severely limits the jobs you can take, and you can't even leave your county to find work without strict prior permission.
Returning to Wesley's story for a moment, it really highlights exactly how this structural trap operates. Despite desperately needing steady work and housing just to meet his basic survival needs and to satisfy his probation requirements, his probation officer never approved a permanent address for him. She only ever approved one single temporary W-2 job. On top of all that, the court ordered him to complete specific therapies, but the Benton County Sheriff's Office delayed this for years simply because they literally didn't have any providers with open waitlists in the county, and initially, they refused to let him look outside of it. The structural limitations were actively, practically by design, setting him up to fail.
Section 3. Officers playing doctor.
The overreach of the probation system doesn't just stop at impossible daily scheduling. It extends deeply into unlawful medical mandates. Under the law, a judge has the judicial authority to mandate severe liberty restrictions, right? Like forcing someone into an inpatient residential treatment facility where they can't leave, they can't see their family, or hold a job. A probation officer, however, absolutely cannot do that. And trusting a probation officer to unilaterally make that call and force someone into inpatient care is a massive, unconstitutional delegation of judicial power.
And thankfully, the courts are actively waking up to this. In recent appellate cases, like United States v. Martinez in the Fifth Circuit and People v. Smith in California, judges have explicitly stepped in. They've struck down conditions allowing probation officers to just play doctor. The courts made it incredibly clear, because of the extreme loss of liberty at stake, only a judge gets to make that call, not a probation officer managing a crowded caseload.
Section 4. Denying medical rights.
So the crucial point here is that beyond forcing unconstitutional inpatient treatment, treatment courts and probation departments across the country have been doing the exact opposite too. They've been unlawfully denying life-saving medications. The science is incredibly clear on this. Opioid use disorder, or OUD, is a chronic medical disease. It is exactly like diabetes, hypertension, or cancer. And just like those diseases, treating it often necessitates prescribed medication. This isn't trading one addiction for another, it is fundamental medical care.
And because OUD is a legally recognized disease, individuals taking their prescribed medication are fully protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Yet, for years, courts and officers have been illegally ordering people to stop taking their medications just to maintain a so-called drug-free supervision environment. It got so incredibly bad that the Department of Justice had to officially step in. They correctly viewed these denials as a direct illegal violation of the ADA.
Section 5. Pushing back for change.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the tide is starting to turn. After reviewing all these systemic traps, we are thankfully seeing real momentum and pushback across the country to fix this whole mess. In Massachusetts, a DOJ investigation forced the trial courts to adopt a completely new OUD policy, explicitly preventing non-medical probation staff from interfering with medications. In Pennsylvania, a DOJ lawsuit actually resulted in the state paying $100,000 in damages and mandating intense ADA training for judges. And out in Oregon, they passed Senate Bill 581, this totally vital piece of legislation that expanded retroactive earned early discharge for people trapped in the system.
Actually, that specific Oregon legislation, SB 581, is what finally changed Wesley Vaughn's life. Because of this bill, his probation officer finally handed him a straightforward checklist to literally cut his supervision time in half. He didn't have to navigate endless subjective rules anymore, he just had to hit the marks. He paid off his fees, he traveled to Salem to finally get his mental health evaluation, finish his work crew days, and on March 12, 2024, that ankle monitor was finally removed.
Let's see how this builds out his future, because the real-world results absolutely speak for themselves. Once Wesley was freed from the endless surveillance and the contradictory traps of community supervision, he just thrived. Within a month, he secured a steady W-2 writing job. He moved back to his home in Portland. He even traveled down to New Mexico to see his family for the first time in 4 long years. Removing the surveillance trap actually gave him the space to safely and genuinely succeed.
Which leaves us with one essential, maybe even provocative question to consider. If probation is fundamentally designed as an alternative to prison, why is it the exact mechanism sending so many people back? The rules, the overreaches, the impossible standards, they all point to a system built way more for tripwires than for actual rehabilitation. It's a vital reality we need to reckon with for the nearly 3 million people currently living under these rules in our own communities. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helped you see the invisible architecture of our justice system a little more clearly.